Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Capricioso with Intersector Partners L3C, and I'm here today with Sarah Echohawk, who's the CEO of American Indian Science and Engineering Society. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
Great to have you. Before we start chatting, I just wanted to give a quick refresher on what this is all about. This is Intersector's Resilient Nonprofit Conversation Series. And as the stay-at-home orders kicked in here in Colorado in March, my partner Rick Zwetch and I started talking about the nonprofits that we saw that were quickly adapting to changes and that seemed really resilient in the face of this global pandemic. And we started wondering why and how this was happening, and we knew the best way was to talk to nonprofit leaders who probably did not intend to put crisis management or global pandemic on their resumes, but found themselves here in these spaces. And I thought that Sarah would be a really great person for us to talk to, because Rick and I have been working with AISES for over a year now on strategic planning and implementation. And we know from your work, Sarah, there at AISES, that you have led a significant organizational turnaround in your 7 years that you've been there. And you have been really focused on this strategic plan and moving the organization even further forward. And then, bam, here we are in the midst of all of this. So I'm excited to talk to you and hear how you all are holding up. First of all, will you tell us a little bit about the organization, what it does, your mission?
Sure. Thanks, Karen. I appreciate you spending time with me today and talking with me about these things. So again, Sarah Echohawk, CEO of the American Indian Science and Engineering Society, otherwise known as AISES. And I am a citizen of the Pawnee Nation of Oklahoma, but I work out of our Boulder, Colorado office. So AISES was founded in 1977 by 3 Native American engineers and 1 Native American geologist, 3 men and 1 woman, which I think is interesting for the time. And really the idea behind the founding of the organization at that time was just recognizing that there were not a lot of scientists, Native American scientists and engineers, that we needed more. And not only that, but we needed a place for them to come together and support one another and try to encourage more Native Americans to get into science and engineering. So fast forward almost over 40 years later, here we are today, and really AISES has expanded its focus to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And really the main focus of the organization hasn't changed, and that's to get more Native Americans into science, technology, engineering, and math. So we do that in 3 different ways. Student success, meaning that we help students in K through 12, parents and educators, providing them culturally contextualized resources for STEM education and help them get into college. And then once in college, continue to support them with internships, scholarships, and really prepping to go into the workforce. And that's the 3rd area, which is workforce development. Oh, I'm sorry, that 2nd area is career success. So student success, career support, and workforce development. So we work with a lot of employers, Fortune 500, Fortune 100, Fortune 50 companies, government agencies, nonprofits. We hold the largest college and career fair every year in Indian country to help Native Americans in the STEM field get positions. So I think the other significant part of that is that we have a very wide reach. We have about 155 K through 12 affiliated schools that serve about 55,000 Native American students. And then we have 199 college chapters throughout the US and Canada, and about 24 now professional chapters. And brand new, we have 3 tribal chapters, and that's fairly new that we started tribal chapters. So our reach is very, very broad. We are the only organization that focuses on Native American STEM education at the national, or if you would, international level, since we work in Canada.
Wow, great. Would you talk a little bit about your board of directors and your advisory councils? Because I think that's a really interesting and important part of your structure and how you function at AISES too.
Yeah, I think it's somewhat unique. So the board is a 12-member board, and then in addition to that, 12-member board, members of the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. A minimum of 10 of those board members actually have to have a STEM degree. The other 2 are, if you will, at will or at large board members, so they don't necessarily have to have a STEM degree, but they have to have an interest in the work that we do. We also have 2 national US student representatives that serve on the board of directors, which I think is unique. And we also have 2 Canadian national student representatives that also serve on the board, which again, I think is also unique that we have student representation. In addition to that, the advisory councils are really external advisory councils to the board of directors, and they're to help advise the board of directors in the different work that we do. So we have a corporate advisory council, we have a government relations council, we have a tribal nations advisory council, and we have an academic advisory council. And really all of those help in all of those sectors. So corporate advisory council is made up by corporate leadership that we work with in a lot of those big companies that I was talking about. Government Relations Council would be from all the various government agencies. The Tribal Nations Advisory Council is made up of tribal leaders and tribal educators throughout Indian country. And then the Academic Advisory Council's tenure track Native American professors throughout the US and Canada. And then finally, I think the last one that I'll mention, of course, which is unique, is the Council of Elders. Which is a council that's made up of elders in the Native American community, and that's nationally. So they represent different regions, and they are really there to advise the board and AISES as a whole on all things that are cultural and our cultural values. So they also advise the board and the staff in terms of how we approach things, and also are a favorite of the students and really support them throughout their journey.
That's so great. One of my favorite things about working with AISES has been this incredible network that you have built in support. I know that doing that takes a ton of time and resources, right, to get all those people involved, but I can really see how it shapes the organization and its work.
It definitely does. It does. And it's a two-way street, you know, with each of these sectors, you know, talking to corporate America about, you know, what it is that we can do to prepare students to go into the workforce in those jobs, but then also, you know, the flip side of that in the workforce development side is for AISES to help advise corporations, government agencies, other employers about how to attract and retain Native talent. So what are the things that they need to do in order to get top Native talent, and how can they be supportive of them once they get there? So I think, you know, that's really been key, and that's really been the other function of those advisory councils.
Cool. And how many staff do you have?
We currently have about 30. Including some of our contract staff.
Okay, so it's March, mid-March sometime this year. Everything's going along. You're planning for in-person regional conferences. We didn't talk about that yet. Your big national conference that's in person. You do a lot of in-person engagement. And of course, all of the chapters are doing lots of activities in person. And then all of a sudden, we're done. No more in-person anything. So what were you thinking as the CEO, as all that was coming down with your 30 staff, all of your advisory councils, your chapters?
Yeah.
How'd you start? How'd you get started?
Right. And here I am, you know, we are still, you know, in the middle of this, so to speak.
Yeah.
But so at that time, I mean, you know, I can talk a little bit about what we're doing now, but at that time, and you and I chatted before the interview here a bit and talked about, you know, what was going on with the financial what am I trying to say? The recession that happened, downturn, thank you, in 2008. And, you know, I had gone through that at the organization that I was working with previously. And we had done, you know, a number of things trying to be sure that we stayed afloat during that time. And so kind of drawing on that experience and understanding that it's important to be proactive and to really start thinking outside the box and not wait really was my thinking. And so very early on, even ahead of closing the schools and stuff, sat down with the leadership on the staff, so the staff directors, and kind of went over a list of about 6 things that we needed to do immediately. And I won't go through this, you know, this comprehensive list, but basically it was to get prepared and to be, you know, thinking about how we're going to move forward. And I will tell you that the top of the list was to definitely be in communication with all of our partners that we were just talking about. So all of those corporations and government agencies and tribal entities that we work with, immediately get in touch with them and check in with them about, you know, the work that AISES is doing and that, you know, what we're going to be doing moving forward, just opening up the lines of communication to ensure them, you know, that we're moving forward. I think, one of the biggest things I've learned as a nonprofit leader in all of these years is that, you never surprise your funders, right? So we just wanted to make sure that we were really keeping the lines of communication open. And then next was to start going through each program and looking at the programs, whether by grant or by program, and looking at what the deliverables were and where those going to be possible given the, direction we were going. At the time, everything hadn't quite been shut down yet, but we, figured we were going that direction. And so starting to come up with alternative models for delivering that, and again, communicating that back with our partners. And so that proved very effective, and coming up with some very, what I would like to say, innovative ways to deliver content, because a lot of what we do is in person. So moving a lot of that to virtual and doing online trainings and communications, et cetera. I think the most difficult part was, that really addressed the direct programming that we had in communities. But the larger events, like you mentioned, we have regional conferences, and then we have our large national conference in the fall. And so for those, we knew there wasn't a lot that we could do. The regional conferences are held at the colleges. So it was really to be in touch with the student chapters who were holding those and really just abiding by what the colleges were doing. And of course, I think all of them, except for one of those, were canceled at that time. And we, of course, reached out to our partners and funders, and they understood because that was happening across the country. I think the bigger challenge has been the national conference. And that's usually about 2,000 people. It's in the fall. This year it's mid-October. It's scheduled to be in Spokane. And just way back in March, when all this started, before we even knew how long it was going to happen or whatever, I did instruct the events team to go ahead and start looking at what we would do if we weren't able to have an in-person conference, and getting on top of it then. Even though everybody was like, well, we don't know yet. I'm like, it doesn't matter. We need to figure it out, because then we have all of our options covered. So fast forward here to where we are today, and we're actually wrapping up the virtual component, or the planning piece for the virtual component of the conference. We're planning on doing a hybrid. It's both virtual and in person. And we hope to have that information rolled out publicly in the next couple of weeks. But because we started, 10 weeks ago, we've really got it figured out. So we feel very good about where we are at this point.
That's great.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I'll mention is we heard about the Paycheck Protection Program like everybody else initially. And if for those who are familiar, it was supposed to roll out on that Friday. And the minute we heard about it, we started doing research again, because I felt very strongly that the funds would go quickly, as of course they did. So I think like you might have done as well, Karen, we really got on it and did a lot of our own research. And we're really ready to go. So on Friday, when they actually opened it, we got our application in and we're approved the following Tuesday. So again, it was just being proactive and just realizing, whatever we need to do to put our energy into what we can do to, to keep us going, and wherever those opportunities are, we just got on it. It was definitely a team effort.
Yeah, for sure. And I was in communication with Amy, and I apologize if there's some weird echoing. Okay. I'm hearing a little echoing. Okay. In communication with Amy about the PPP, I think we were as excited that you got it as we were that we got it. By the time we had communicated back and forth, and what are you doing, and who are you going through, and how's it working? It felt good in that moment to have something super proactive to do. I feel like there was a lot up in the air before that, and then this gave a concrete step to take.
Exactly. I mean, and again, just not knowing, what's down the road, and knowing that definitely our events would be impacted, and then very possibly our fundraising. So we knew that, we would definitely benefit from doing that, and being able to keep people employed. So yeah, it was helpful. It was really hard because there just wasn't a lot of guidance, and I think again, we just really went through the act on our own and called people that were bankers that weren't necessarily our bankers. I mean, just anything we could do to gather the information and get ready and understand, just ready to go. But our bank also turned out to be tremendous. So we were fortunate there. I know other people had no control over that because if your bank didn't have it together, there wasn't anything that you could do about it. So
Yeah, now we just need to hope for the forgiveness part to go.
I know.
Go well.
We're already on that too. So the minute they rolled that Friday, the Treasury released that, we were on that too. Just
Great.
learned. I'm like, oh wait.
Well, you said that you're adapting, definitely doing this combo virtual and in-person conference in the fall. And I know that you're doing all the work that the organization typically does, plus rolling out a strategic plan that had a number of significant goals. How are you thinking about all of that as we're starting to reopen and think about what comes next? Is your perspective changing at all? Are you having people come back to work? What does it look like now and in the next month or so?
Well, I think in terms of the strategic plan, and you know this because you've been working with us on it. But for the most part, most of that is carrying forward because it's still relevant, which to me says that's a good plan, right? Mm-hmm. Because it really was about the organization and building it, continuing to build the infrastructure going into the future. So most of that is continuing to happen. I'm excited about that. I think the one thing that we did put on hold was the capital campaign, just to be honest, and that makes sense given what's happening right now and what's happening in the economy overall. So of course we'll revisit that next year, but everything, yes, is continuing to carry forward. In terms of having people come back to work, we're fairly lucky in that we don't see a lot of clients coming in, like we don't have clients coming into the office. All the work that we do is generally stuff that we take out to the community. So again, that's all been revamped. We have some really incredible work happening up on Indian Reservation, Cheyenne River in South Dakota, where some of our contract staff there are creating some very unique and incredible culturally contextualized virtual content. So really taking, again, our programs and making them virtually available so that we don't have to, quit our work. So in that respect, the work is carrying forward, staff are carrying forward. Staff are working remotely. We started that in mid-March, both in the Albuquerque office and the Boulder office. We already had the ability, people already were able to telecommute a day or two a week. And so we basically just had everybody just work from home. And so we've been utilizing Zoom, GoToMeeting, and we have Teams, which has been incredibly helpful for internal communication that we are already using. And then we already have remote staff, as I mentioned, in South Dakota. We have some in Boston and some in Oklahoma. So we're pretty used to this virtual format. So I would say we miss interacting with each other, but it wasn't a terribly difficult transition logistically for us to do. And just because of, the uncertainty and the difference in counties and what's happening at the state level, we made a decision in mid-May, so fairly recently, just to go ahead and continue telecommuting, everybody telecommuting through June, and we'll revisit in mid-June and then make a decision. We do alternate with having a couple of people come into the offices to collect mail and make sure things are getting shipped in and out and that kind of stuff, but that's it. Everything else is online.
Okay, great. Kind of like a holiday schedule where you have to have somebody come in.
Exactly. Somebody's got to fill in, right? Yeah, but again, we use, not trying to make a plug for Teams or Microsoft, but we use Teams for everything, including our phone. And so everybody's got the app on their cell phone, so it's all just seamless. You call the number, and if you transfer, then it just comes right to my cell phone here at home.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. One of the things Rick and I have been talking a lot about is what makes an organization resilient, and whether it is people, leadership, and leadership teams that are people who are kind of leaning in the resilient direction in the first place, or if it's that the resiliency is built into your organization. What do you think about that for AISES?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually think about that a lot. I'm not sure if it's one or the other. I will say, my favorite quote kind of along the same lines is by Mike Markkula, who of course was one of the original founders of Apple. And, he says, great companies know how to reinvent themselves. And I think that is so true. And I think that straddles both leadership and culture. And so, I think companies, whether they're nonprofits or for-profits, have to change as times change. I think that's if you're not able to do that, then you're not going to survive. So what that means to me and the way that I look at that, and when I came into AISES 7 years ago, and it was, kind of on the downslope, and we've talked, and others are probably aware of nonprofit life cycles. That's pretty typical, but AISES had been around for almost 40 years at that point and was really kind of on the, kind of on the downslope, so to speak.
Yep.
And at that time, what is the opportunity is either to recognize that maybe we're, our mission is done and we need to close the doors, or in my opinion, we need to reinvent ourselves. And so that was really, what the approach that I took, and I had been through something similar where the organization I've been before, which is, really taking stock of what are our assets, what do we have, and then what is the need out there, and then how can we put those two together and start to move forward. And part of that is having, you did mention leadership, so certainly at the board level, we needed that leadership, the board that could be supportive and be ready to change, because change is often difficult, right? So we needed to have a board that was willing to embrace that and willing to take some risk, and we had that. We were very lucky. The other part of that for me was hiring people who were ready to bring their ideas and get to work. And like Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, I think, the most important thing when you're building an organization is it's not so much the position, right? You spend a lot of time on position descriptions and, what are the different positions in the infrastructure of the organization. To me, what is more important is who are the people in the organization. And so I really went after just trying to hire the best and the brightest people that I could find that were really wanting to come in and do the work. And then once they come in, really figuring out then where do they fit within the framework, and then developing, if you will, the work around them. And that's generally how I manage and lead even today. And so we have a really great team. We have very little turnover, and just people that are ready to work and move forward. And so I think we have a very entrepreneurial attitude, culture in our organization, which I think is important, again, about the reinvention. And here we are again, now up against the pandemic. So can't just keep doing everything we've been doing. Again, we've got to get that entrepreneurial hat on and be like, okay, now what can we do, and how can we do it differently, and what can we try? And certainly in this staff, we all embrace that. So, while I don't know what the future holds, I feel very confident about this organization's ability to confront it.
Yeah, that's great. I have really observed through working with you all the ability for you to all come together and kick around a bunch of ideas, because you are an idea group, which I love.
Yes,
and also it's my,
sometimes a little too much.
yeah, it's my and Rick's job to also help you go like this. So, that this part was super fun. But everybody has such great ideas. But what I've really admired is how you come together around an ultimate direction, and everyone rolls up their sleeves and gets to work.
Yes.
I haven't seen anyone saying, oh, why are we doing this? Or this is too hard, or just kind of not doing the work.
Right.
Everybody really is showing up and getting it done.
And they do. And I think that's because, as you mentioned, we share a lot of ideas, and everybody knows that, everybody's empowered to say or, whatever they think and suggest, whatever approach they want. And then, kind of drilling it down to coming up to ultimately what is the consensus decision about what we're doing. And so we have a lot of diverse staff, and I think that also lends to the entrepreneurial side of what we do in terms of coming up with new ways to do things, because we certainly all don't think alike, as I think from working with us. But we definitely are not opposed to direct dialogue and really hatching out any issue to figure out where we want to go and how we want to get there.
Wonderful. You have primarily Native American staff of your 30 people. To what degree do you think resiliency is a Native American trait or way of being?
No, that's a good question. I think we often say we are resilient people. And, I crafted a message in mid-March to send out to all of our members and constituents and partners, or the AISES family, as we call it. And really, at the end of that, close that message with, as Native people, as Indigenous people, like we've been here before. And I mean, quite literally been here before with disease and pandemic, threatening our population and our way of life. So I think when we talk about being resilient, yes, Native people are resilient here after, 500 years of colonization, and we're still here. And not only that, we're thriving, and our population is growing. So I think the resiliency, the diversity is key, and has been a big part of the organization. Yes, we hire, you know, or I wouldn't say we hire primarily Native, but we have primarily Native staff.
Mm-hmm.
And being Native American doesn't really explain or identify who our staff are, because within Native America, there are over 570 different tribal nations and different languages and different cultures and different customs. So we have majority Native staff, but they all come from very diverse backgrounds. And it's like we tell employers, that will only lend to the strength of your organization, because you're going to bring in a diversity of ideas, a diversity of beliefs, and a diversity of approaches to solving problems. So that, I think, is very evident in the work that AISES does, and the uniqueness of who we are and where we've gotten in the last 7 years here. And, you know, speaking to the resilience part, I think, you know, sadly enough, we are used to dealing with great challenges. And I mean, huge challenges, you know, challenges that a lot of people probably will never face in their lifetime, but a lot of our people have. And so I think we understand what's at stake here, and the work that we do changes lives, and it changes the lives of our people, and we understand how important that is. So I definitely think that's a piece of it. It's like I'm crying, I'm having allergies.
So I think thank you so much for taking the time to talk about AISES and what you all have been up to and how you're handling these new challenges in the world. I think for some people who watch this might be the first time they've heard about AISES. And so what are ways that people can get involved? How can we support you anytime, but especially now during the global pandemic? And
yeah. Well, you know, a few things come to mind. So some people probably have seen in the headlines that Native people have been especially hard hit, especially in some of our Native communities like Navajo and others, where we've been hit hard with the pandemic, and that has to do with the lack of infrastructure. Certainly there are some rapid response funds that are being set up, and you can certainly contact AISES. We have a list of the rapid response funds. We have also created one. It's called the T3 Fund, which is Together Toward Tomorrow Fund. And again, we created that right around mid-March, started to work on that again as well, saying, okay, what can we do? And knowing that we are a experienced scholarship provider, part of what we do is provide a number of scholarships to Native American students, we knew that what we could do was get money out through scholarships directly to students, not through the schools, to help them with their financial needs. And that was necessary because what we were hearing from our students, of course, when schools are closing and going to online platforms, a lot of Native American students either don't have access to internet, and of course, we're maybe using the computer lab at school, which is closed, so they don't have access to internet, they don't have computers. So, and then having to move home, perhaps to the reservation again, dealing with some of those issues of connectivity and computers. Also, a number of companies and government agencies had to cancel their summer internships, and that's another thing that AISES helps Native American students get employment in the summer through these internships. So their financial plans for the summer were also then put on hold, and they lost their employment. So all of those things, we knew that Native students were really desperate just for basic funding, just to, you know, whether it's to, you know, pay for internet at home on the reservation, buy a used laptop, help their, you know, buy groceries, any of those things. So we started that fund, and to date we've raised about $67,000 and awarded about 120 of those direct scholarships.
oh,
So that's
great.
You can donate through our website, aises.org, AISES.org. And any amount helps. These are small scholarships. They're $500 each, but they go a long way for our students. In AISES in general, I'd like to say, typically I ask people to volunteer at our events. And as we, you know, start coming out of this and are able to do more in-person events, we welcome volunteers, and there's usually a volunteer sign up when we have those opportunities on our website. And that is just a great way to get involved and to learn more about AISES and about the Native community at large, and really get involved without having to make a monetary donation, and it's tremendously helpful to us. And the last thing, Karen, last thing I'll say is just in general, I think what I usually ask people, and this is not necessarily from AISES, but just as a Native person, is just to stand up and stand with us when these issues come up, like what was happening at Navajo, and just be visible and help make that visible amongst your friends, because often what happens with Native people is that we're more or less invisible. We're left out a lot of the statistics, and when we talk about issues of race, we often leave out Native Americans. So it's really our challenge often is just to be visible. So I would ask people just to stand with us and to try to help us raise the visibility of our people and our communities.
Wonderful advice. I hope that people will do whatever they can. We know it's a tough time for people all over the world, but if you can do anything to help, if you believe in STEM education, STEM careers for Native people, and doing what you can to help a really great organization, I encourage you to support AISES. We know them kind of inside and out right now, so I can tell you that your money will be put to good use.
Thank you, Karen. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for taking the time to talk today, Sarah. It was great to see you and have a chance to catch up.
Good to see you too. Thank you. Take care.